All right. Well, last week we finished talking about Hatshepsut and how that she may well and probably was the young woman that found baby Moses in the basket in the bulrushes and took him to her home and ended up raising him. The question was raised on if she was only 9, how could she have raised a child? And there's a couple of answers to that. They, in the royalty at least, they were forced to mature early, but even if she was acting like a 9-10-year-old by the time, well, first of all, Moses' mother nursed him for a period of time, but he would have had nursemaids his entire life. The adoptive mother wouldn't even have ever had to touch the baby. When you live in royalty, you can afford childcare, and they definitely had all the best educators and all of that stuff. So we talked today about privilege. They definitely had privilege being the royalty of a great nation of Egypt. So anyway, it's just so interesting to think about that. And the more you read about Hatshepsut and all the things that she did, and it's only been, in the last century that they've been digging and making real headway in the Valley of the Kings. You hear about new discoveries all the time that they made in the Valley of the Kings. And that's why we know so much more about Hatshepsut now, is because they've made so many more discoveries, and they discovered that one temple that she built, that great temple that I showed you a picture of last week. And it's just full of inscriptions and statues and busts and all that kind of stuff. And they all have writings on them in hieroglyphics that tell about whoever the statue is, and they all associate themselves with the rulers of the time. And I have a book. It's a great big one. I'd bring it in, but it's basically a picture book of a lot of stuff that they've found, but it has descriptions of what it is. And there's Hatshepsut had a courtier, or I don't know what else you would call it. But he was like a governor, I guess, under her. Took care of all her business. He actually was responsible for Nefer, which was Hatshepsut's stepdaughter. He took care of her and brought her up, but he also did a ton of other stuff. And he has like 28 statues of himself. He had these statues created of himself that were scattered around in a couple of the temples. And they all say all kinds of, great things about him, but they also say, tell his position under this great Hatshepsut, and he's just one of the people that there were statues of all over the place, and they find the statues or the remnants of the statues, and you can look at pictures of them yourself. Anyway, his name was Senenmut, and he apparently didn't have any family, so that's all he had to do. That's all he had to brag about, was the fact that he was a courtier for the Pharaoh Hatshepsut and the Pharaoh Thutmose III, the next one that followed after Hatshepsut. So anyway, finding all these things, they've just gained so much more information, and so now it's just exploded. You can go on the internet and look up Hatshepsut and find all kinds of stuff about her. So that's interesting to me. So I've been doing that quite a bit. But anyway, we got through that stuff and talked about the conquest of Canaan. How even that, the whole idea for this whole Old Testament survey is seeing how the people never really did live up to God's expectations from the very beginning. That's why Abraham was chosen, because rather than trying to keep control of the whole world, God chose to nurse one family through to the time that the Messiah would come to bring salvation to all mankind. And so that was through Abraham. But even with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, there's issues all along. And anyway, with the conquest of Canaan, they ended up having to wander in the wilderness for 40 years because they lacked faith. They didn't. 10 out of 12 spies said, we can't do this. These guys are too big, And so God says, well, then you can just walk around the wilderness for 40 years and think about it for a while. And anyway, none of those 10 spies and none of the men that were of fighting age when they entered into the wilderness left the wilderness to go into the land of Canaan. So anyway, just constantly disappointing God, constantly showing lack of faith, or even worse, going after idols, wanting to go back to Egypt, building a golden calf, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, finally, God, through Joshua, led the children of Israel into the land of Canaan. They were told to wipe all the nations out, start totally fresh in this nation. And did they do that? Nope. They got themselves into the nation, but they didn't wipe everybody out like they were supposed to. And as a result, the influence from all those idolatrous peoples infiltrated the people, and they became idolaters as well. And so we had the period of the judges. The children of Israel would chase after these idols. God would send a nation against them and punish them. And then they would go crying to God, oh, we're sorry we did this. We'll never do it again. And so God would send one of the judges, and he would deliver them from whatever nation it was. And then for a period of time, 40 years, 50 years, whatever, during the time that this judge was alive, they would follow after God. But as soon as he was gone, then they would start going back to their idols. And it just was a repeating cycle through 15 judges. And we talked about the individual judges last week, all these 15 judges. I'm not going to talk about them again, but the list of nations that they delivered the people from is on the right-hand side there. And as you can see, towards the end, the big enemy that they had to deal with was the Philistines. And Samson, Eli, and Samuel all dealt with the Philistines. Well, in the book of 1 Samuel, we have the stories of Eli and Samuel. And with both of them, they were both great guys. They were really good, but their children were rebellious. Both with Eli's sons and Samuel's sons, they didn't follow after the ways of their father. And so even with the judges in their own families, there was rebellion. And so it comes down to what I want to talk about today. And that is, after this continuous cycle of 15 judges, problems, finally, the children of Israel, the people of Israel finally says, we're sick of this. We want a king like everybody else. And the story of that is in 1 Samuel chapter 8, and I want to read through this chapter and just talk about some things as we go. It says, now it came to pass when Samuel was old that he made his sons judges over Israel. So there actually were more judges than what are listed in the book of Judges. And here at the first part of Samuel, there were more judges, but and they're even named. The firstborn was Joel, and the name of the second was Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. But his sons did not walk in his ways, and they turned aside after dishonest gain, took bribes, and perverted justice. That sound like anything that's going on now? The same kind of stuff has been happening over and over and over again. So verse 4 says that then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, look, you're old. Who likes to be told that? But you're old and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. We want to be like everybody else. That also sound familiar? You hear that all the time. Well, everybody's doing it. You know, that's what kids are always telling their folks. What I told my folks, and when I was young. Anyway, the children of Israel said, look, you're old, your sons aren't following after your way. We want somebody to lead us. We want a king like everybody else. But verse 6 says that the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. So Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, heed the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. Really, it should have been, and it should always be, God is ruling over us, whether it be as a world, whether it be as a nation, whether it be as a congregation, whether it be me or you as an individual. The only ruler is God. That should be the ruler, the one that is the authority in our life. But Samuel didn't like the fact that they wanted a king. I mean, here he is, he's a judge, he's leading the people. Now they're saying, we want somebody else. And so God says, yeah, don't take offense, Samuel. It's not you, it's me. They're rebelling not against you, Samuel, they're rebelling against me. And so that really, in that one sentence, is the key to the entire Bible as far as mankind relationship with God. When we fall into sin, well, even in Psalm 51, when David wrote the Psalm 51, in which he is talking about the fact, what had happened with him and Bathsheba and how he had committed adultery with her and then killed Uriah, her husband, to try to hide the thing. Well, in Psalm 51, he says, like, create in me a clean heart. But he also says there, against you only have I sinned. He understood the concept. When we sin, it really is God that we're sinning against. And so that's what he's saying right here as well. They haven't rejected you, Samuel. They have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. God should be king of the world, king of the universe, God above all. The very first of the 10 commandments, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and all thy mind. And the second, thou shalt have no other gods before me. God should be number one, but he never really has been. Not with them, or not with the people of Adam and Eve's age. Wasn't with Cain, wasn't with all the people that ended up getting killed in the flood, wasn't with the people that built the tower trying to build a tower to heaven, going against God's will all the time, that through the judges cycling up and down, up and down, up and down, just all of that. God never really has been the ruler in people's hearts. And today, by and large, that same thing is true. Now, as individuals, there are a lot of people, by far a tiny majority of people, but there are people who, just like in Samuel's day, Samuel was a righteous guy and he wanted to serve God. Eli did too, and most of the judges were that same way. Even God used some of the men to judge that really weren't quite there, like Samson, for example. But anyway, the whole idea about this whole thing is, that's what the Bible is trying to tell us, that people have always fallen short And the better you understand that principle, the better you understand that bad news, the better you can understand the good news, the great news, the gospel, when it starts to unfold, which we'll be talking about. And the better you can understand this whole cycle of sin, punishment, sin, punishment, down through the time, God punishing cities, God punishing nations because of their sin, because of leaving him. The better you can understand in the New Testament, Matthew 24, talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, the book of Revelation, also talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. And the better you can understand how that all unfolds and comes to its climax with Jesus and his working in this world, becoming flesh and dwelling among men. And so that's the whole reason we're looking at all of this, is to get that firmly pounded into our heads. Then Revelation will make a whole lot more sense to us when we start looking at it. So anyway, let's see, where was I? Okay, verse 8. He says, well, first of all, he's saying to Samuel, listen, do whatever they say. They're asking for a king, give them a king. They're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. Then he says, according to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them up out of Egypt, even to this day, with which they have forsaken me and served other gods, so they are doing to you also. It's been going along, Samuel, for a whole long time. Since the day they came out of Egypt, they've been doing this. So it's not just you, it's really me they're doing it to. Verse 9, now therefore, heed their voice. However, you shall solemnly forewarn them and show them the behavior of the king who will reign over them. And so God is saying to Samuel, tell him, okay, I'll give you this king, but here's what's going to happen. Here's what this king that you are crying for is going to do. And here's what it is. In verse 10, it says, so Samuel told all the words of the Lord. It wasn't his own. He's not making this stuff up. He's saying what the Lord told him to tell him. Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who asked him for a king. And he said, this will be the behavior of the king who will reign over you. Here's what he's going to do. He will take your sons and appoint them for his own chariots to be his horsemen, and some will run before his chariots. Now, you have to use your imagination to see, to envision that. Now, if you know about the war and everything, it was the chariots that led into the battle, because they were the ones that were the strongest force they had that would wipe out the most people. But there was ones that ran before the chariots. What do you think their chance of survival was in any kind of war? Not much. And so he says, they're going to make your sons run before his chariots. And they're going to make your sons run the chariots as well. He will appoint captains over his thousands and captains over his 50s. He will set some of your sons to plow his ground, reap his harvest, and some to make his weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. What do you think that means for a person that's a farmer? What's going to happen to their sons?
They're not going to be the
At the very minimum, they're not going to be there to help them out. So you want a king, you're going to be paying for it. You're going to be doing your own work, because your sons are not going to be around to help you. They're either going to be off getting killed in war, or they're going to be working for the king and doing his plowing for him and reaping his harvest and all that, doing his farming, making his weapons of war. Instead of making plows for you, they'll be making swords for the king. And then he says he will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, and bakers. And so where's this king? He's going to be living a a luxury life. That's how kings work. If they're the sole leader, there isn't a king that's ever lived, I don't think, who didn't live a comfortable life. And the only way you can get a comfortable life is to get somebody else to do all your work for you and make you live in the lap of luxury. That's going to be your daughters are going to be the ones that are making all these beautiful smells that are going to happen in the palace. And they're going to be making food and baking food. And it's going to be your daughters are doing that. And so guess what? You're not going to have girls around to do your own baking for you. Some of you at least are going to lose. Now the king, is he going to take the worst cooks and the worst bakers? No. Anybody that's a really good cook is going to be the king cook and baker. And so you might think you're lucky if your daughter is a real good cook until the king comes knocking at your door and says, hey, I heard Lila is a great cook. Send her my way. I'm going to have a good cook. And there goes your cook. So anyway, Samuel's saying, this is what's going to happen. If you want a king, this is what's going to happen. He will take the best of your fields. Now the king needs to have fields in order to supply food for all of these people that he's taking away. Somebody's got to feed them. And so is he going to take the worst land? No, he's going to take the best land, and whoever's got the best land is going to lose it. It says also in doing so, he'll take the best of your fields, your vineyards, your olive groves, and give them to his servants. So here you are, people, you're going to be giving your land to servants of the king. And he will take a tenth of your grain and your vintage and give it to his officers and servants. But not only is he going to take your best land, he's going to take a tenth of everything that you have, a tenth of your own grain that you managed to produce, and he's going to take it. So nobody's going to escape this. We all know about taxes. We only wish that we were going to pay 10%. We pay a lot more than that, but they had tithes to pay to the priests. Now they're going to be paying tithes to the king as well, and maybe more than tithes. Okay, so anyway, he says in verse 16, and he will take your male servants and your female servants, your finest young man and your donkeys, and put them to his work. So this is just a repetition. He'll take your sons, he'll take your daughters, he'll take your servants, and not just, he'll take your best, your finest young man and your donkeys, put them to his work. So all the stuff that you're using to do your work, they're going to be taken and doing the work of the king. And some of the great building projects that you read about that these kings do, guess who does it? It's the sons and daughters of these people that are asking for a king. So he says in verse 17, he will take a tenth of your sheep and you will be his servants. And so he's going to be taking a tenth of everything. You'll be serving him. And it's not going to be like you're imagining, having this great king to protect you. That's what they wanted. They were sick and tired of all these nations coming after Israel and having to be delivered all the time, not even realizing or not thinking about the fact that the reason that these nations were coming in waves was because of their misbehavior, because of their disobedience to God. But anyway, they just wanted a king. They thought a king will do it. He'll protect us. God will be with him. But this king is going to be an oppressor. Samuel's telling the people, and you will cry out, excuse me, in verse 18, you will cry out in that day because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves, and the Lord will not hear you in that day. Just like you've been crying out to God every time these nations come, you cry out and God sends a judge to deliver you. You get a king, and there will come a day when you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves, the Lord will not hear you in that day. Sue?
So they already have to give a tenth of everything to the temple, to the synagogues. So now they have to give another tenth to the king. So basically, they're taking more and more away from them all the time.
Yeah, and
But this is their choice that they're taking it away. I understand that, but you know, it's, when you think about it, now it's 20%. It's not 10.
yeah,
Well, as Carl pointed out, once kings get a taste of power and money, it never stops at 10.
Yeah.
yeah, just like it is today. When we started off with an income tax or with taxes, it started off. Has it decreased or increased since that started?
No double taxation.
It just keeps going up, and they don't just raise the percentage, they add more and more taxes. First it was the income tax, then sales tax, then property tax, then luxury tax, inheritance tax,
Breeding tax.
taxes on motels.
Yeah.
Any Beatles fan knows the song "The Tax Man," and I forget the words, but if you try to walk, they'll tax your feet. That kind of stuff. They'll find ways to tax everything. And anyway, the Lord through Samuel is telling them, "You're going to cry out, just like we cry out now." Man, can taxes get any worse? I mean, look at what's happened with gas price, and they're taxing gasoline also. Washington State happens to tax one of the highest taxes for gasoline. And so they just kill us with taxes, and we cry out, "Come on, get us some relief." And so we pass a bill saying, okay, this tax on having a car, no, we're going to have a straight thing, $30. So what did they do?
They have fees.
How many of you pay $30 a year for your car? I don't see any hands. They figured out a way around, okay, we won't call it a tax. We'll call it fees. And so they figure stuff out. Anyway.
Sorry, who do you want to call?
Well, I don't know why I thought I was talking about.
Well, you said they call.
Oh, all right. These things are too smart for their own good. Keith was talking. Keith and Pat got new phones, and they said that when their phone rings, other phones nearby ring too. And I thought, oh, wouldn't that be a great joke to turn your phone down so that nobody can hear it, but then somebody calls your phone and everybody else in the congregation's phone rings at the same time. Anyway, so I forgot exactly where I was, but bottom line is God's not going to listen. He's been bailing you out. God's just going to say, all right, you guys can just live with your king and you'll pay the price. What price comes? So the next thing is verse 19. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel and said, no, but we will have us a king over us, that we also may be like the nations, that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles.
There's the lie. How many kings go out and fight their own battle? Right at the front of the line.
Yeah. Well, there's that. And even if you did happen to get a good king that, was right out in front, who's doing the actual fighting? The king can only do so much by himself. It's your sons that are out there fighting the battles. So it's not like the king is going to do it for you. You're going to be fighting the battles. And sometimes he's not just going to be defending you. He's going to say, hey, we need more land. Let's go fight. And we'll see who we can steal their land from them. And so just to get more land for the king, your sons are going to lose their lives in fighting these battles for your king. But even after being told all that, the people says, we don't care, Samuel. We don't We don't care what you're saying. We want a king. We want to be like all the other nations. If they had really looked at the other nations and saw what really happened in the nations, they might have thought differently. So,
Well, that's like, promising free college. You never have to have a house payment again. All these things that we've heard in the past, none of them have happened. They just make promises, but they don't intend to.
yeah, well, and they say stuff that just won't work. A guaranteed basic income. If you have that, that's what they're doing right now, paying $600 a week for unemployment. Well, why would I work if I can get more for unemployment than I can working? You're not going to get people to work, and eventually, if people are not working, making products and all that kind of stuff, the money's going to run out.
And we're seeing that.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah, and so these kings are not the answer. But yeah, they're saying no. We want the king to fight our battles for us. That's really what they were after. They were just so narrow-minded, narrow-sighted. They could only see one path, and that is, we want a king to judge us, to deliver us from the nations. So it says, and Samuel heard all the words of the people. This is verse 21. And he repeated them in the hearing of the Lord. So he goes back, prays to God, and says, okay, here's what the people are saying. And so the Lord said to Samuel, heed their voice, make them a king. Samuel said to the men of Israel, every man go to his city. And so that's the end of that chapter. And that's what I wanted us to see, is this story. Even when they're told, here's exactly what's going to happen. Does any of that stuff Samuel said, does any of that stuff sound fun, sound good, sound like an advantage? No, these people are so focused on what they want, they can't even see the logic and the sound reasoning of what God is telling them. And say, just give us a king, just give us a king. That's what we want. And that's what is happening today with people. They say, just, you try to explain to them, if you try to do this is what's going to be the end result. No, we just want to do this. This is the answer. How do you deal with that? How did God deal with it?
Left them to their own.
All right, you want it, you got it. And so we're going to see, yeah, they got themselves a king, and then they ended up repenting of having gotten a king. And the Bible says they repented, but they still kept the king, but they just said, we're really sorry. And some of them actually did try to do the right thing from time to time. That's what we talk about next. So they get a king. First king was Saul. How great was Saul? He was oppressive. He ended up being, essentially out of his mind. He ended up chasing David all over the place because he thought David was trying to usurp his throne. And well, if you don't know the story of Saul, you can read about him. I'm not wanting to get in detail about everything that is in the Old Testament, but bottom line is Saul was not a good king. And so God says, I'm taking the kingdom away from you. I'm going to give it to another person. And that Saul was neighborhood of 1040 BC, 1040 BC. And then David was in the neighborhood of 1000 BC. David became a king. Was he a good king? He was a better king, but did he take a lot from the people? Yeah. Did he fight a lot of wars? Yes, he did. Did he live a perfect life himself? No, not even close. Now, we're told that he was a man after God's own heart. So, I mean, he did have something there. He did repent when it was shown to him, but it had to be shown to him. He didn't see it on his own. And does that ever happen to you? To me, sometimes you have to have a brick thrown up against your head for you to get the picture. And God loves us enough to do that for us. He loved David enough to do that for him. And so anyway, bottom line is you don't see perfection anywhere along the line. And so God brought Solomon along. Now David, at the end of his time, he said, God, I would love to build you a temple. After all that had happened with the Ark of the Covenant, the Philistines had stolen it and kept it for, I forget how long it was, but they kept it long enough to realize that they were going to be destroyed if they kept it, because every city that they put it in had the people started getting tumors and other bad stuff started happening. So they would get this out of here, but they sent it to another of their own cities. They sent it to all 5 of the cities of the Philistines, Ekron, Gath. Anyway, all 5. And finally it says, we need to get this out of here before it kills all of us. And so they sent it back to Israel. And then it was in Israel for 20 years before they made a good place for it. But then David says, no, I want to build a really nice temple for it. The God said what to David? No, you're not going to build it. And why?
He was too much of a warring king.
Too much war. The very thing that God said your kings are going to be doing to you people, David did it. Even though he was a pretty decent guy, he was a warring king. And God says, I don't want a warring king to build my temple. And so he let Solomon do it. And about 966 BC is when the temple, when they first broke ground on the temple that Solomon built, this great, magnificent temple, a temple that was built on the site of, does anybody know what had happened there where they built the temple? That it was built right over the rock where Abraham had taken his son, Isaac, and laid him there, built an altar, laid the wood there, laid his son on there, raised his knife up before God says, hold it. I know now that you have the faith, this great faith. So you don't have to sacrifice your son. And it was on this rock on Mount Moriah that event had happened. And that's where David built the temple. And that same rock is still there on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. And what is built right over that rock?
Mosque.
Called what? The Dome of the Rock. It's that rock, this sacred rock from the time of Abraham. That's where the temple was built. And now that's where the Dome of the Rock mosque, Muslim mosque, is built. And that's why there's so much friction between the Israelites and the Muslims, is because of that. The Israelites can't go to the most sacred place on earth for them, the place where Abraham was going to sacrifice his son, and where all the sacrifices that they ever did with the temple were done right at that spot. Then that temple got destroyed. We'll talk about that next time. That temple got destroyed, and it was because of disobedience of the people. So anyway, we got Saul, David, and Solomon. These were the kings of what we call the United Kingdom, when Judah and Israel were united together, where there was just one nation of the children of Israel. Next week, we'll talk about how that got split and what happened and all that. Any questions or comments it's time for us to stop for right now. All right, if not, thank you for your attention and appreciate it.